Hey, Composing Gloves here, and today we're going to be taking a look at Edison. Today we're going to be looking at typical uses. So right off the bat, getting to Edison can be a hassle. So right here, if I want to get to Edison, I'd have to open up the insert slot. I'd have to find it, which it's in here, and then I'd have to record enable it, change it to on play. Whoops, I accidentally record enabled it on play first, then record enable. Then I probably want it slaved. Now it will record when I am playing back in FL, right? And if I'm going a bit fast, this is just typical uses. We're going to cover all these things later on down the line in future videos. And also, if you want to know more about recording with Edison, go check out the Recording Basics series on my channel, and we'll cover that there. So this is just a clunky process, right? That's like way more steps than I want to go through to load up an Edison. So there's two options to loading up Edison. You can hit Control E, and this will bring up just an Edison, and you can configure it to the settings you want here. So that's really handy dandy, but that's not exactly geared towards recording. So if I hit Shift E, it will bring it up. Whoops, what the heck? If I hit Shift E, I hit Shift R. Shift E will bring up Edison, and as you see, it's been slaved, it records, and it's on playback. So if I were to select this, and you notice that it goes behind, let's say I want to keep Edison in front, I just hit this down arrow and select detached. Alternatively, you can just hit it and select D, and it will toggle that for you. So now when I select the playlist, it stays on top. So now when I hit play, it will begin recording, and I can have like a whole bunch of Edisons open, and they will record just like this. Oh, and I'm recording general stuff too. That's not good. But anyways, you get the idea. And now if I unrecord enable it, the slave playback will come into effect, and you can see that the cursor moves according to wherever this is. So that's really cool. Now let's say that you want to use it to loop record, right? That's another thing I do all the time because I really like the way it loop records. Well, if I begin recording on playback and just have it play and then play again, let's say that I want to hear it, but how does the slaving work, right? Because I have all these different takes now. Well, if I go through, it'll start at the beginning. So if I just control click on one of these markers, it'll select that region, and then I'm able to scroll through like that. So I'm able to audition my different takes the same way just by changing my selection, which is a really handy way. If you want to delete your entire selection, hit Control A and then just hit delete on your keyboard. Easy peasy. So that's loop recording. You want to be careful, and I talk about this in more detail in the Recording Basics series, but this records everything into RAM, and the reason is so you can immediately hop into its other functionalities. And using edits with this, editing with Edison will cause more memory to be used in RAM. So that could be very undesirable. And if you're going to record a long piece of audio, then this is definitely not what you want to do. You want to use the playlist editor. But we talk about all that stuff in that series. So let's go ahead and jump over to another use. So that's recording with Edison. And that's like some ways to go about auditioning takes and just checking things. If I have a vocalist over and we're doing overdubs, I probably am going to use Edison to do that. And if I turn slave off, then this has no relationship to what's going on in here. So, and the record functions are a little complicated, or they not complicated, but they could be confusing. This record stage is completely separate from this record stage, and where you load the Edison is where it's going to be recorded. Also, the signals that hit Edison are going to be independent because this happens before it hits the fader. So you can actually turn down Edison and still be recording hot levels, which can be a really great thing as well. And if you put it before the effects in your effects slots, you can record a dry signal. If you put it after the effects, let's say you load up some effects, then you can record a wet and dry signal. And just make sure that they're both record enabled and on play when you want to record. As soon as you hit play, all the instances of Edison will begin recording. So this is really handy dandy. I still prefer the playlist for like large recording sessions, like a lot. So, and we talk about that over there. So, okay, what are some other reasons why I'd want to grab Edison? Well, Edison has some features that are pretty nifty for editing samples, right? So let's say that I drag a sample onto here. And let's say that I have a layer and all I want is the tail end of this kick because I already have a kick with a much better transient. So what I'm going to do is traditionally I would click and drag to get rid of it. And then I'd probably have to volume automate it and put a fade there. And then I'd have something like this, right? And maybe that's not even what I want. But now, if I want to use this sound, I'd have to click and drag, or I'd have to record it probably through an Edison. This is just not a handy process, right? Or I could freeze it. but that's just not cool. So what I could do instead is I could load it into an Edison, just straight up into an Edison and do the edits in there. Now, if I wanted to do this though, you might go in, you might load up an Edison, you might grab and load one and then grab the sample and drag it in. And like that's just so much. I mean, I did it pretty quick, but that's still like so many more steps. And every now and then you open up this list and you can't find what you want. It's super annoying. So what you can do instead is you just hit Control E and bam, it'll load up Edison. Well, it'll load up a Edison and put the kick in there. But I want to point out something. It moved our Edison. So you notice this is on insert 4, but this is on the master channel. So it didn't load up a new Edison in this case. What it does first is it looks for an empty Edison. So here it was like, oh, here is an empty Edison. There's nothing in it. And so I put the kick in there. That's a little unintuitive. Actually, that's really unintuitive. So you just want to be aware that the Edison might be on some other channel. If you have an empty one somewhere, it's going to use that. If we were to do this again, Control E, it will, it detects that it's already been loaded up into one. Well, let's get rid of it just so I can show you what happens. If we go none, and then we come over here and we hit Control E now. Oh, there's another one. Gosh, dang it. All these Edisons. Hey, you can see the unintuitiveness of this. But if you hit the Edison, it should pop up. But if you don't have that available, that could be very bad. So we'll go on our master. Now we'll hit Control E. And there it is. It loads up on our master as expected. I don't know of a way to change that behavior. But anyways, that's a thing. So now we can do our clicks, right? Or our edits. So to edit an Edison is really easy. All you do is double click and it brings up the little playlist head. And in order to select something, you have to double click and drag. And so we have now selected the transient that we don't want. We can just hit delete and gonzo. It's gone. And let's say that this area is clicking. I don't think it is. But if it was clicking, I could go to my regions and go to, not regions, tools, and go to declick in all regions. And that'll just make sure there's a little fade so I don't get clicking. And let's say that I want the fade out again. So I can just hit this little fade icon. Bam, there it is. And we have the tail end of the kick the way we want it. All we have to do now is click this little drag icon and drag it onto the sample channel. And now I'm free to use it using all my original methods. And I don't have to go through all the ridiculousness that I just described. It's just right there. So I know that sounded like a lot of steps, but honestly, it's so simple. You just click it, hit Control E, it loads it up. You do whatever you're going to do to it. Maybe fade in, fade out. Maybe for whatever reason, that's what we want. And you just drag it onto the new sample channel and bam, you are ready to roll. You're able to edit samples in very intuitive ways. So let's go over a couple other pretty cool things. So there are some things I'd pull open Slicix for, like auditioning the kicks. Slicix, I have a whole series on Slicix, so just go watch that. It's actually in the FL12 effects series as well. Even though it's technically a generator, I decided to include it there. But there's something that this can do that Slicix can't do, and that has to do with how we audition it on our keyboard. So if I hit my keyboard right now, it's just going to play whatever I have selected, which is what we'd expect it to do. But what this can do something that Slicix can't do, which I'm kind of surprised. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Slicix can do this, but as far as I know, Slicix can't do this. And what it is if you go into File, Settings, and then you go to Link to Key. Right now it's on Auto, so it's just going to play. Auto pretty much works like Slice Preview. So Slice Preview is, as I hit it, let's just do this. Let's add a couple slices. So to add a slice, you hit Alt-M, and well, it will add a region. And to move a region, you simply click and drag it. If your thing is snapping to the grid, you just hit this, just make sure your little magnet icon is off. And let's say I want to add another one here, so I'm going to hit Alt-M, and there it goes. And you see it defines the end of the region as well for me. So, okay, cool. I've had these regions, and if I play it, you see that it just pretty much plays through my slices. But let's say I want to make this whole thing as a kick. So I'm just going to right-click and delete these. Let's say that I want to play this thing as a tonal sample is what I meant to say. So I'm going to go to Settings, and I'm going to go to Note Preview, and I'm going to hit Accept, and now I could play it as a tonal sample. Now, of course, that might not be desirable, but you could get a preview of what you're going to do and then drag it into the playlist editor. So now I'd be like, oh, this is like exactly what I want. Because maybe I'm doing some additional editing. Maybe I'm adding some blur, convolution, or something. And now I'm ready to drag it in and use it in my production. So I could drag it in, and now I like know how it's going to behave and whatnot. Let me quick check that Slicex thing because I am actually, yeah, it's not there. Doesn't exist. There's no settings icon. That still blows me away. You can't freeze a region and do that in that plug. But that is something that Edison can do. So that's one of my typical uses. So this would be more useful if maybe you have a vocal chop or something and you just want to see how they're going to sound. Because consider this. We could come in here. We could grab some sort of a... Oh, we don't want a demo song. We want a loop. Oh, we have all these different pieces, right? Well, we could put them in regions and select them, test them out, and then drag them to their own sample channels and test and just do it like that. Another thing you can do, let's say that you have a whole bunch of regions you want. You can make a bunch of regions. So we could say, oh, here's a region, Alt-M. Here's another region, Alt-M. And now you want to export all these regions at once. Well, you can do that. You go to Export Regions, and then Sampler Use and Common Use. Common Use is, I believe, it just renders them out as WAV files. Sampler Use keeps the root note with the sample, which I've never really had to use this. And I only recently decided to actually learn what the difference was. So I just use Common Use. And if I'm going to use it in a sampler, I'm usually going to change the root note in the sampler anyways, because it usually maps as whatever C5 or whatever the sampler uses by default. So, okay, cool. And you can change it. Things like contact, if you just name it right, you can change it. Also, you may want to be wary of what you name these things. So if you right click on the region and hit R for rename, or you can select rename from the list, you can rename it something useful like click. And then some samplers like contact or whatever, you can even define like the note. So let's say we want it to be A3. And now I could tell contact to look at this bit and actually use that. Not all samplers support that functionality, but that's something that just be cautious when you're naming if you intend to do something like that. I do most of my sample editing of this nature actually in the playlist and just render them out one by one that way. And that offers a couple additional options in the render settings. So yeah, that's what I use this for. Something cool you can do with the regions is you can add blur, you can add convolution. And the neat thing about adding convolution or blur in this one is it's not happening in real time. It's printed to the effect. So it's printed to the audio. So you don't have to use additional processing on your playback. So that's one reason why you might want to grab something, put it in there. You're able to go in and actually reverse particular samples. So right now we've reversed it and I could hit Control Z. That was our original. So that's pretty cool. You can come in here, do all those things, change all these playback settings. Another cool thing, if we go into the settings here, now if you go through my Slicex one, we cover pretty much everything in here, but we're going to go over it with regards to Edison because this is sort of where it came from. But we have the ability to declick in and out, very common things I'll use, and blur, equalize, and convolution reverb, like I said earlier. We also have the ability to run scripts on our samples. So if you want to write your own DSP script and use it, you can. This is something I'm not going to cover. This is way more complicated. Just be a bit careful. Some of these scripts have given me problems. I think it was just the example scripts because they didn't make a whole lot of sense to open. I wanted to see what would happen if I clicked them. But yes. So if you hit Control A, you can select everything, delete everything. We've talked about adding regions. I believe that's just about it for typical uses. Just understanding that like hitting Control E can open that up for you and save you that much time is so useful. So I usually grab it just to make simple edits like that. Nothing too crazy. Some cool things you can do with Atmosphere with the blur tool, which we'll cover in succeeding videos. If you have any questions, let me know. Subscribe and have a blessed day.